I'm Jeff Cornwall, and this is the Entrepreneurial Mind. Today my guest is Ron Samuels with Avenue Bank. We'll be back to talk with him after this.
Talkapolis programming is sponsored in part by the Center for Advanced Dentistry, now serving the greater Nashville area.
Welcome back, Ron.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back here.
So, Avenue Bank is a wonderful example of a local community kind of bank that's had a lot of success with entrepreneurs and small business people. And you've been at this now for 8 years.
8 years. Last week was July 9th, was our 8th anniversary, opening of our first office.
Now, I remember talking with you before Avenue started. You were still wrestling with the name and all that kind of stuff and raising money. And we were in pretty good economic times at that point in time. And then you launch and the whole world changed.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the new normal we started talking in new normals.
Right.
Certainly the economy was robust in Nashville. You saw a little bit of issues in Florida and maybe on the West Coast with mortgages, but nothing serious. Interest rate, prime, 8.25, projected for 2007, a 9% prime rate. So a very robust environment.
And then everything collapsed and everything changed, and all of a sudden you're dealing with virtually 0% interest rates.
I mean, you know, I told our leadership team the good news is we had, you know, kind of shocked our balance sheet and our numbers, projections, 200 plus or minus, and I said interest rates won't go to 0. I was wrong. They went to 0.25.
Yeah,
so,
they did.
You know, how do you,
and they're negative in some parts of the world now.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of certainly banking lessons, but, you know, let's talk a little more broadly about, I mean, you're an entrepreneur doing this bank.
Right.
What lessons have you learned, and not just learned, but maybe things that you probably knew, but that really got brought home in terms of the importance of what entrepreneurs need to get through some of these kinds of challenges you never imagined you'd be facing?
Well, you know, we've learned a lot of lessons. You know, you start with a beautiful game plan. You got to sell that game plan to investors. You got to sell it to the, you know, the compliance people, the state regulators, the FDIC. And the great news is there for the learning process is be flexible.
Right.
Be agile.
Right.
Be willing to deal with, you know, those things that are coming at you every day.
Is that hard though with investors? I mean, you
Yes.
have to raise a lot of money to start a bank, and
You
they
know,
have expectations. And
exactly. We raised $75 million, which was the largest capital raise for a de novo, basically, bank. We bought a charter from a bank, got started and up and running pretty quick. Did all this in 100 days. Once you go out, typically, the regulatory environment is such that you execute that plan.
Right.
And you stay to the detail, and they hold you accountable for that plan. But fortunately for us, we were kind of quasi de novo in that we had bought a charter, so we weren't, you know, we weren't considered exactly de novo. That allowed us to be more flexible, and we started looking at the environment we were going to operate in. We made adjustments along the way. But the other learning is, for us, I think, is we saw and had an opportunity. There was disruption in this marketplace which created that opportunity. But we had said early on, we have to have a sustainable competitive advantage. And what is it? And in a commodity business, much like, you know, all money's pretty green,
Right.
You've got to stand out. And it's a crowded marketplace. So we created a concept called concierge banking. Nobody really knew anything about it, hadn't heard about concierge banking, and we put, you know, some foundation around that. Our view was we would have limited number of offices. Guess what's happening today? You know, people are downsizing with the number of offices, selling
Right.
them off. No tellers. It was a back to the future approach, but a very disciplined service model, almost hospitality-like. So in that, we learned that, while comparing ourselves to our peers from a financial standpoint was really something that was helpful, comparing ourselves to peers in the hospitality industry or service industry was a whole lot more helpful.
Right, right. So, so getting back to investors a little bit, kind of walk me through what have you learned about managing a pretty significant group of investors with high expectations, and what lessons have you learned for anybody that might have investors in their business?
Well, I think communication is critical, early and often.
Sort of like we do with bankers.
Absolutely. You don't like surprises.
Right.
So if you think about bankers as investors in different businesses and creating a loan portfolio, we like to keep up. Well, the same applies. And I think it applies to the regulatory front as well. Good relationships with those people that are going to regulate you. I mean, we ask them as partners. I mean, so we treated them differently, knowing we have to have that support. You think about it, a board is very important during that environment. I mean, some people could have said, hey, this leadership team is not capable of pulling us through this recession. We were losing money early. The board was confident in leadership. They supported us. We kept them informed. But I think that we did a couple of other things in the sense of creating, even though we didn't have to, we acted like a public company. So we put out shareholder letters, we put out our financials to the investors, made them aware of what our plans were, the adjustments we were making to those plans, and kept them informed. And we listened to them. We asked our investors too for advice.
Now, you've kept most of your team intact
Yes.
during this whole time. What's been the secret? Because, my experience in working with banks is I always made a rule of thumb to get to know my banker's boss, because the odds of that banker being there in 6 months wasn't that great.
I think, it's another fundamental to us is we've created a work environment that's different. I mean, we've been recognized by the Tennessean as, in fact, just recently as the best mid-size company in Middle Tennessee to work for. The ABA magazine, American Bankers Association, recognized us last year as the 4th best bank to work for in the country. So creating a great work environment really is critical to keeping people on board. There's something to creating a signature bank for Nashville that has a little more noble purpose about it. And I think people really, particularly millennials today, buy into doing things like that.
Right.
And we have a young workforce blended with seasoned professional folks that have been around a while, and that seems to work.
Well, I have several of my alums work for you.
They do.
And they love it.
Yeah.
They just, they can't say enough good things about everything that you've just described them, and they love the environment there.
Well, it's a spirit of embracing that creative spirit of Nashville. I mean, we have a very strong creative community, and that was one of our goals is, everybody said, Ron, we don't need another bank in Nashville. And I said, I understand that, and this is not going to be another bank. What we're going to do is challenge everything you think you know about banks. We will redefine how people experience banking. And I think we're a long way down that road. At least that's what our agency tells us when they do the research and give us feedback. People really do see us as a different option. And, you attract those people that value that innovative, creative spirit, and they value expertise and a high level of service.
Well, congratulations on 8 years, and
Thank you.
many more to come.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks
It's
for coming
always
by.
good to see you.
You too.
Thanks for having me.